Which section of BNS 2023 corresponds to the former section 420 of IPC dealing with cheating and dishonestly inducing delivery of property? Section 318 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 is a recodified provision dealing with the offence of cheating and dishonestly inducing delivery of property, which was earlier covered under Section 420 of the IPC 1860. Under the Income Tax Act 1961, a previous year generally means, and under Section 3 of the Income Tax Act 1961, the previous year is a financial year, 1st April to 31st March, immediately preceding the assessment year in which the income tax is assessed to tax. B is the right choice. Aarti seeks divorce from Rajesh on the ground of cruelty. The relevant provision under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 is Section 13(1)(ia) of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 expressly recognizes cruelty, mental or physical, by either spouse after the solemnization of marriage as a ground for divorce. An appeal from an original decree lies under which section of CPC? Section 96 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 confers the substantive right of first appeal from every original decree passed by a court exercising original jurisdiction. A is the right choice. Under the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881, dishonor of check for insufficiency of funds is an offence under Section 138. C is the right choice. Section 138 of the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881 specifically penalizes dishonor of a check on account of insufficiency of funds or because it exceeds the amount arranged to be paid, treating it as a quasi-criminal offence. Order 39, Rule 1 and 2 of CPC deal with temporary injunctions. Order 39, Rule 1 and 2 of the CPC empower the civil court to grant temporary injunctions to restrain a party from causing injury or breach of pending the suit in order to preserve the status quo. D is the right choice. Section 89 of the CPC 1908 provides for Section 89 of the CPC, inserted by the 1999 amendment, mandates the court, where elements of settlements exist, to refer the dispute to arbitration, conciliation, mediation, or Lok Adalat. So D is the right choice. Trial of summons cases by magistrate is governed under which chapter of BNSS 2023? Chapter 21. Chapter 21 of the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023 specifically lays down the procedure for trial of summons cases by magistrates corresponding to Chapter 20th of CRPC 1973. B is the right choice. Under CRPC 1973, Section 161 dealt with statements to police, which BNSS now governs the same. Section 180, C is the right choice. Section 180 of the BNSS 2023 governs the examination of witnesses by the police and the recording of their statements during investigation, replicating the substance of the old Section 161 of CRPC. The Goods and Services Tax (GST) was introduced in India with effect from July 1, 2017. GST was rolled out across India from July 1, 2017, following enactment of the CGST, IGST, UTGST, and Compensation Acts pursuant to the 101st Constitutional Amendment. C is the right choice. The doctrine of Adi Alterum Partem means Adi Alterum Partem is a Latin maxim of natural justice that literally means hear the other side. That is, no one should be condemned unheard. B is the correct choice. Hear the other side. The polluter pays principle was applied by the Supreme Court of India, in which case? The polluter pays principle was articulated and applied in all three cases: MC Mehta versus Kamal Nath, Indian Council of Enviro Legal Action, and Vellore Citizens Welfare Forum, making all of the above correct choice. Soham finds his trademark Fit Life is being used by a competitor for similar goods. His remedy is Section 29 of the Trademarks Act 1999 specifically provides a statutory remedy for infringement when a registered trademark is used by another in relation to similar goods or services. Choice C is the right choice. Under BSA 2023, the burden of proof in a criminal case lies on. Under the BSA 2023, the prosecution must establish the guilt of the accused beyond reasonable doubt, since the presumption of innocence remains the cornerstone of criminal jurisprudence. A. The prosecution beyond reasonable doubt. Under the Transfer of Property Act 1882, sale of immovable property worth 100 rupees or more must be Section 54 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 requires sale of tangible immovable property of value 100 rupees or more to be effected only by a registered instrument to be legally valid. D is the right choice. The principle that no man shall be a judge in his own case is known as nemo judex in causa sua is the rule against bias under natural justice, meaning no person should sit in judgment in a cause in which he has an interest. Choice B is the right choice. The doctrine of estoppel is dealt with under which section of BSA 2023? Section 119 of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam codifies the doctrine of estoppel, corresponding to the earlier section 115 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872. B is the right choice. The Guardians and Wards Act 1890 primarily deals with the Guardians and Wards Act 1890 is the secular law that governs the appointment and declaration of guardians of person or property of a minor, irrespective of religion. C is the right choice. Appointment and declaration of guardians for minors. Under the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, daughters in compulsory property. The Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005 amended Section 6 to confer upon daughters equal compulsory rights by birth in joint Hindu family property as confirmed in Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma. A is the right choice. Have equal rights as sons by birth. In which case did the Supreme Court read procedure established by law in Article 21 as requiring fairness and reasonableness? In Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India 1978, the Supreme Court held that procedure established by law under Article 21 must be just, fair, and reasonable, effectively reading due process into the Constitution. Under the Patents Act 1970, the term of a patent in India is Section 53 of the Patents Act 1970 provides that every patent granted in India shall be for a term of 20 years from the date of filing of the application. Choice C is the right choice. Under the Companies Act 2013, the minimum number of directors required for a public company is Section 149(1)(a) of the Companies Act 2013 mandates a minimum of 3 directors for a public company, 2 for a private company, and 1 for a one-person company. A is the right choice. Under the Transfer of Property Act 1882, rule against perpetuity is provided in Section 14 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 codifies the rule against perpetuity, restricting creation of interest beyond the lifetime of one or more living persons plus the minority of the ultimate beneficiary. D is the correct choice. The principle of corne patens competence is in arbitration is contained in Section 16 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 embodies the competence and competence doctrine, empowering the arbitral tribunal to rule on its own jurisdiction, including the validity of the arbitration agreement. The offence of organized crime has been introduced as a distinct offence under which section of BNS 2023? Section 111 of the BNS 2023 introduces organized crime as a distinct codified offence for the first time in general criminal law, drawing from state enactments like MCO-CA. B is the correct choice. The Factories Act 1948 applies to a factory employing how many workers with the use of power? Under Section 2MI of the Factories Act 1948, an establishment qualifies as a factory when it employs 10 or more workers and uses power in the manufacturing process. Choice A, 10 or more, is the correct choice. Under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955, the minimum age of marriage for the bride is Section 5(3) of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 prescribes the minimum age of 18 years for the bride and 21 years for the bridegroom at the time of marriage. A, 18 years is the right choice. Under Section 100 of CPC, a second appeal lies to the High Court only on Section 100 of the CPC permits a second appeal to the High Court only when the case involves a substantial question of law so as to discourage repeated factual challenges. C, substantial question of law is the correct choice. Which amendment made the right to property a legal right by deleting Article 31? The Constitution 44th Amendment Act 1978 deleted Article 19(1)(f) and Article 31, downgrading the right to property from a fundamental right to a mere legal constitutional right under Article 300A. Which article of the Constitution of India guarantees the right to constitutional remedies? Article 32, which Dr. Ambedkar called the heart and soul of the Constitution. It guarantees the right to move the Supreme Court for enforcement of fundamental rights through writs. C is the correct choice. Maintenance for a wife under Section 125 of CRPC, now corresponding BNSS provision, is available. In Section 125 of CRPC, now mirrored in BNSS, is a secular beneficial provision under which only any wife unable to maintain herself regardless of religion can claim maintenance from her husband. D is the correct choice. Frivolous bills may be dismissed with cause as held in State of Uttaranchal versus Balwant Singh Chaufal 2010, the Supreme Court issued detailed guidelines to weed out publicity interest or private interest litigations and held that frivolous bills may be dismissed with exemplary cause. B is the correct choice. Under Article 356, President's rule in a state can initially be imposed for a maximum continuous period of 6 months. Article 356(4) requires a proclamation of President's rule after parliamentary approval to remain in force for 6 months at a time, extendable up to a maximum of 3 years on certain conditions. Choice C, 6 months, is the correct choice. Misappropriation of client's money by an advocate amounts to misappropriation of a client's funds constitutes professional or other misconduct for which disciplinary action lies before the Bar Council under Section 35 of the Advocates Act 1961. B. Professional misconduct under Section 35 is a correct choice. The Industrial Disputes Act 1947 defines workman under which section? Section 2, yes. Section 2(s) of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 defines workman to mean any person employed in any industry to do manual, unskilled, skilled, technical, operational, clerical, or supervisory work. Under BNS 2023, Terrorist Act is defined and punishable under Section 113 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 codifies the offence of Terrorist Act within general criminal law for the first time, mirroring the substance of provisions found in the EAPA. C is the right choice. Section 113. The doctrine of res gestae under BSA 2023 corresponds to which section? Section 6 of the BSA 2023 corresponds to the old Section 6 of the Evidence Act and embodies the doctrine of res gestae. Facts forming part of the same transaction are relevant. A is the correct choice. Which section of BNSS 2023 deals with the power of the magistrate to take cognizance of an offence? Section 210 of the BNSS 2023 enumerates the modes by which a magistrate may take cognizance of an offence on complaint, on police report, or on his own knowledge, replacing the old Section 190 of CRPC. B. Section 210 is the correct choice. Under Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023, which section defines fact in use and relevant fact? Section 3 of the BSA 2023 is the definitional section that, among other terms, defines fact in issue and relevant fact, mirroring Section 3 of the Old Evidence Act. Section 3. B is the correct choice. The maximum period of judicial custody during investigation for an offence punishable with death or life imprisonment is 90 days. Under proviso to Section 167(2) of CRPC carried forward in BNSS, the magistrate may authorize judicial detention up to 90 days for offences punishable with death, life imprisonment, or imprisonment for 10 years or more. B. 90 days is the correct choice. The general exception of right of private defense of the body is contained in BNS 2023 in which section range? 38 to 44. Section 38 to 44 of the BNS 2023 deal with the general exception of right of private defense of body and property modeled on Section 96 to 106 of the old IPC. Sections 38 to 44. B is the right choice. Under BSA 2023, electronic and digital records are recognized as primary evidence under which section? Section 61. Section 61 of the BSA 2023 expressly recognizes electronic and digital records as admissible evidence with the same legal effect as paper records, treating them as primary evidence. Section 61. C is the correct choice. The writ of quo warranto is issued to. Quo warranto literally means by what authority, and is issued by a constitutional court to inquire into the legality of a person's claim to a public office. D. Question the legal authority of a person holding public office. D is the correct choice. Under the Motor Vehicle Act 1988, claims for compensation are filed before Motor Accidents Claims Tribunal. Choice A. Section 160 of the Motor Vehicles Act 1988 establishes Motor Accidents Claims Tribunal, which have exclusive jurisdiction to adjudicate claims arising from motor accidents. A is the correct choice. An advocate is debarred from advertising Under Rule 36 of Part 6, Chapter 2 of the Bar Council of India rules expressly prohibits an advocate from soliciting work or advertising, either directly or indirectly. So, choice C is the correct choice. Bar Council of India rules, Part 6, Chapter 2. Rajesh, in anger, fractures Sunil's arm with an iron rod, disabling it for weeks. Which offence applies? Fracture of a bone falls within the definition of grievous hurt under the BNS. The intentional infliction of such injury is punishable as voluntary causing grievous hurt under section 117. D is the correct choice. In which case did the Supreme Court lay down guidelines against sexual harassment at the workplace as PIL? In Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan, the Supreme Court, through a PIL, laid down binding guidelines on prevention of sexual harassment of women at the workplace, which later led to the 2013 POSH Act. C is the correct choice. Which schedule of Constitution contains the anti-defection provisions? 10th schedule. B is the correct choice. The 10th schedule, inserted by the 52nd Constitutional Amendment in 1985, contains the anti-defection provisions disqualifying legislators who defect from their parties. B, the 10th schedule, is the correct choice. Under the Advocates Act 1961, which authority is empowered to take disciplinary action against an advocate for misconduct? Section 35 read with Section 36 of the Advocates Act 1961 vests the State Bar Council with original disciplinary jurisdiction and the Bar Council of India with appellate jurisdiction over advocate misconduct. So D is the right choice. Under Section 89 of the CPC, which of the following is not a recognized mode of ADR? Plea bargaining. Choice D. Section 89 of the CPC lists arbitration, conciliation, judicial settlement, including Lok Adalat. So, plea bargaining is not a recognized mode of ADR. D is the right choice. Under which section of CPC is the doctrine of res judicata codified? Section 11. Section 11 of the CPC codifies the doctrine of res judicata, barring court from trying any suit or issue that has been finally decided between the same parties by a competent court. The doctrine of lifting the corporate veil was first established in which leading case? The doctrine of lifting the corporate veil was first applied by the House of Lords in Daimler Company Limited versus Continental Tire and Rubber Company in 1916 to look beyond the company's separate personality during wartime? A is the correct choice. A confession made to a police officer is inadmissible under which section of BSA 2023? Section 23 of the BSA 2023 expressly renders confessions made to a police officer inadmissible against an accused, carrying forward the bar earlier contained in Section 25 of the Evidence Act 1872. Choice D. Section 23 is the correct choice. The inherent powers of the High Court are preserved under which section of BNSS 2023? Section 528 of the BNSS 2023 saves the inherent powers of the High Court to make orders necessary to give effect to any order under the Code, to prevent abuse of process, or to secure the ends of justice, corresponding to Section 482 of the CRPC. Section 528, choice A is the correct choice. The Special Marriage Act 1954 requires a notice of intended marriage to be given a 30-day notice in advance. Section 5 of the Special Marriage Act 1954 requires the parties to give a notice of intended marriage to the marriage officer at least 30 days in advance. D is the correct choice. The rule of absolute liability in India was laid down in MC Mehta versus Union of India, oleum gas leak case, 1987. The Supreme Court evolved the rule of absolute liability, dispensing with the exceptions to strict liability laid down in Raylands and Fletcher. A is the correct choice. Under BNSS 2023, anticipatory bail is provided under which section? Section 482 of the BNSS 2023 provides for grant of anticipatory bail by the High Court or Sessions Court to a person apprehending arrest, replacing the old Section 438 CRPC. Section 482. C is the correct choice. Under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, the time limit for making an arbitral award in domestic arbitration is 12 months from completion of pleadings. Section 29A of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, as amended in 2019, mandates the award in a domestic arbitration be made within 12 months from the date of completion of pleadings, extendable by a consent or by court. Which section of BNSS 2023 governs the procedure for trial before a court of session? Section 251 of the BNSS 2023 prescribes the procedure for trial before a court of session, including framing of charges and recording of evidence, replacing Section 226 onwards of the old CRPC. Section 251. D is the right choice. The minimum qualification to be enrolled as an advocate under the Advocates Act 1961 includes degree in law from a recognized university. Section 24 of the Advocates Act 1961 requires the candidates to hold a degree in law from a recognized university in India as a minimum qualification for enrollment as an advocate. Under Section 138 Negotiable Instruments Act, the check must be presented within following the 2012 amendment to the NI Act. Section 138 requires a check to be presented within 3 months from the date drawn or within its period of validity, whichever is earlier. A is the correct choice. Under BSA 2023, dying declarations are admissible under which provision? Section 26 of the BSA 2023 deals with statements by persons who cannot be called as witnesses, and Clause A covers dying declarations which were earlier under Section 32(1) of the Evidence Act 1872. So Section 26A. A is the correct choice. The National Green Tribunal was established under the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010. The National Green Tribunal was established under the National Green Tribunal Act 2010 to provide effective and expeditious disposal of cases relating to environmental protection. So, choice A, 2010 is the correct choice. Under BNSS 2023, the maximum period of police custody during investigation may extend up to 60 days. Under Section 187 of the BNSS 2023, police custody during investigation may be granted in fragments at any time during the first 40 or 60 days of the total custody period, depending on the gravity of the offense. D is the right choice. The current statute governing land acquisition in India is the Land Acquisition Act 1894 was repealed and replaced by the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act 2013, which now governs land acquisitions in India. D is the correct choice. The Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952 applies to establishments employing 20 or more persons. Section 1(3) of the Employees Provident Funds and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952 extends the Act to every establishment in which 20 or more persons are employed. Choice D is the correct choice. Under IPC 1860, Section 124A dealt with sedition. Which section of BNS 2023 covers acts endangering sovereignty, unity and integrity of India? Section 152 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 penalizes acts endangering the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India, replacing the offence of sedition that was earlier contained in Section 124A of the IPC. Which article empowers the Parliament to make laws on any matter in the state list in the national interest? Article 249 empowers Parliament to legislate on any matter in the state list if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by 2/3 majority declaring it expedient in the national interest. Article 249. Under the Information Technology Act 2000, identity theft is punishable under Section 66C of the Information Technology Act 2000, inserted by the 2008 Amendment, specifically punishes identity theft. Section 66D is the correct choice. A contract entered into by a minor is void ab initio, as held in Mohori Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh. C is the right choice. The directive principles of state policy are contained in which part of the Constitution? Fourth part. Part 4 of the Constitution, Articles 36 to 51, contains the directive principles of state policy which, though non-justiciable, are fundamental to the governance of the country. Fourth part. C is the correct choice. Under the 2013 Land Acquisition Act, consent of affected families is required in private projects to the extent of 80%. Section 2 of the 2013 Land Acquisition Act requires the consent of at least 80% of affected families for acquisition of land for private projects and 70% for public-private partnership projects. C is the correct choice. Under the Income Tax Act 1961, capital gains arising from transfer of agricultural land in a rural area are exempt as it is not a capital asset. Section 214 of the Income Tax Act 1961 excludes agricultural land in a rural area from the definition of capital asset. So gains on its transfer do not attract capital gains tax. The principle of lis pendens is embodied in which provision? Section 52 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 embodies the doctrine of lis pendens, which prevents any party to a pending suit from transferring the property in dispute to the prejudice of the other party. Section 52 of TP Act 1882. The concept of pill was popularized by which judge of the Supreme Court? PIL jurisprudence in India was pioneered jointly by Justices V.R. Krishna Iyer and P.N. Bhagavati, who relaxed locus standi rules to widen access to constitutional remedies. So D is the right choice. An application to set aside an arbitral award is filed under which section of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996? Section 34 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 sets out the limited grounds and procedure for challenging and setting aside a domestic arbitral award. The basic structure doctrine was first propounded by the Supreme Court in which landmark case? The basic structure doctrine was first propounded by a 13-judge bench in Keshavananda Bharati v. State of Kerala 1973, which held that Parliament's amending power under Article 368 does not extend to altering the Constitution's basic structure. Choice B is correct. Keshavananda Bharati v. State of Kerala. Under the Specific Relief Act 1963, specific performance of a contract may be granted. After the Specific Relief Amendment Act 2018, specific performance has been made the general rule rather than a discretionary remedy of last resort, granted only when damages are inadequate. Choice D is correct. The defense of volenti non fit injuria means volenti non fit injuria literally translates to one who consents, no injury is done, and operates as a complete defense in tort where the claimant freely consented to the risk. To one who consents, no injury is done. Choice B is correct. Under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, the pecuniary jurisdiction of the District Commission is up to following the 2021 Central Government notification under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, the District Commission exercises pecuniary jurisdiction over consumer disputes where the value of goods or services paid does not exceed 1 crore. Inspector Rao receives information about a non-cognizable offence at the police station. He may Section 155(2) of the CRPC and corresponding BNSS provisions bars the police from investigating a non-cognizable offence without the order of a competent magistrate. Refer information to magistrate, cannot investigate without magistrate's order. A is the correct choice. The rule in Rylance versus Fletcher relates to Rylance versus Fletcher 1868 established the rule of strict liability for damage caused by escape of things brought onto land in the course of a non-natural use of land. Strict liability. Choice B is correct. An ex parte decree may be set aside under which order of the rule of CPC? Order 9, Rule 13 of the CPC empowers the defendant to apply for setting aside an ex parte decree on proving that summons was not duly served or that he was prevented by sufficient cause from appearing. So the correct choice is C. Order 9, Rule 13. Publishing or transmitting obscene material in electronic form is punishable under which section of the IT Act 2000? Section 67 of the Information Technology Act 2000 makes punishable the publishing or transmitting in electronic form of any material which is lascivious or appeals to the prurient interest. A is the correct choice. Under the Code on Wages 2019, payment of bonus is governed and the eligibility is for employees drawing wages up to 21,000 rupees per month. Section 26 of the Code on Wages 2019 entitles every employee drawing wages up to 21,000 per month as notified to bonus subject to the qualifying conditions of the Act. B is the correct choice. Under BNS 2023, the offence of snatching has been newly defined and punishable under Section 304 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 carves out snatching as a distinct, newly codified offence with its own punishment, separate from theft and robbery. Section 304. The court fee for a suit is determined by the value of the Court Fees Act 1870 determines the court fee payable on a plaint or memorandum of appeal by reference to the subject matter of the suit and the relief claimed. Choice D is correct. Subject matter as per the Court Fees Act 1870. Under the Indian Contract Act 1872, an agreement without consideration is Section 25 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 declares that an agreement made without consideration is void, save for the specific exceptions of natural love and affection, past voluntary services, and time-barred debts. These are the exceptions. Choice A is correct. Void unless covered by Section 25 exceptions. Public interest litigation in India was developed primarily under which article? Pill in India has been developed under Article 32 Supreme Court and Article 226 High Courts through liberalization of the rule of focus of locus standi to permit any public-spirited citizen to approach the constitutional courts. C is the correct choice. Right to education was inserted as a fundamental right under which article by the 86th Constitutional Amendment? Article 21A. The Constitution 86th Amendment Act 2002 inserted Article 21A guaranteeing free and compulsory education to all children between the ages of 6 and 14 as a fundamental right. B is the correct choice. Which statement on Sapinda relationship under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 is correct? Section 3F of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 defines Sapinda relationship as extending up to third generation through the mother and the fifth generation through the father, both inclusive of the person concerned. Under Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, the offence of murder is punishable under which section? Section 103. Section 103 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 prescribes the punishment for the offence of murder, replicating the substance of Section 302 of the IPC 1860. Section 103, B is the correct choice. The seventh order of the CPC deals with. The seventh order of the CPC contains the rules governing the form, contents, particulars and rejection of a plaint, including the requirement of cause of action and territorial particulars. B is the right choice. Section 65B of the Old Evidence Act on Electronic Records is now substantially incorporated in BSA 2023 in Section 63. Section 63 of the BSA 2023 reproduces with refinements the regime earlier contained in Section 65B of the Evidence Act 1872 regarding the admissibility of electronic records. The doctrine of legitimate expectation was recognized by the Supreme Court in which case? In Union of India versus the Hindustan Development Corporation, 1993, the Supreme Court formally recognized the doctrine of legitimate expectation as part of the principles of natural justice and judicial review in administrative law. A is the correct choice. Under BNSS 2023, information relating to a cognizable offence, FIR is registered under which section? Section 173 of the BNSS 2023 governs the registration of information relating to a cognizable offence, FIR, corresponding to Section 154 of the old CRPC. Section 173 of BNSS C is the correct choice. The basic exemption limit for an individual as a C below 60 years under the old regime was 2,50,000. D is the correct choice. Under the Muslim personal law, Shariat Application Act 1937, the period of iddat for a divorced woman is approximately. Under classical Muslim personal law, the iddat period for a divorced woman is 3 menstrual cycles or 3 lunar months if she does not menstruate, during which she cannot remarry. Sushma files a suit in a Delhi court for property situated in Mumbai. The Delhi court has Section 16 of the CPC mandates that suits relating to immovable property must be instituted in the court within whose territorial jurisdiction the property is situated. So, a Delhi court has no jurisdiction over Mumbai property. C. No territorial jurisdiction. Suit must be in Mumbai. The doctrine of frustration of contract in India is governed by which section? Section 56 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 codifies the doctrine of frustration, providing that an agreement to do an act impossible in itself or which subsequently becomes impossible or unlawful becomes void. A. Section 56 of the Indian Contract